So I was digging through my mountains of scrap fabric, as I tend to do.
And cue the scrap digging montage!
When I stumbled across a little piece of fleece. But not just one piece of fleece, a whole bag of fleece.
I missed. Yeah.
Forget about on.
I missed.
For this project, you'll need some fleece. Isn't this paw-tastic pattern just the cutest, and it'll match perfectly with my little buddy's paws? A ruler or measuring tape, some scrap paper, I'm using this old envelope, scissors, note to self, stop using fabric scissors to cut non-fabric items, a pencil, and of course your trusty sewing machine. You could definitely hand sew this project too, it'll just take you a bit longer. Okay, let's get right into it. I'm going to start by taking some measurements of the width and length of your foot. We use this to create a pattern that you can then reuse over and over. Because trust me on this one, when you see just how easy these socks are to make, you'll no doubt be creating loads more for yourself, your friends, and your family. Once you've got your measurements, mine were 36 by 12 centimeters, sketch out a rectangle with these dimensions onto the paper, making sure that everything is symmetrical, and then also adding a centimeter to either end of the length of the measurement for seam allowance. I didn't do this, but looking at how the pattern turned out, I probably should have. The next step is to calculate a quarter of your rectangle length. This was 6 centimeters for me. Make a mark at this point and then draw a straight line. Do the same at the 3/4 mark length. Using these guidelines, join the 3 points of the T with a curve so that you end up getting a sort of pill shape. I highly recommend labeling all of your points. So like the toe, the heel, just so you don't get confused when you're cutting out the pattern later. It'll make things a lot easier. And that's the pattern. Super simple, right? Go ahead and cut this up, and then we can transfer the shape onto our fabric. To construct each sock, we'll need 3 different pieces. The first is the bottom of the sock, which you can trace your pattern out exactly for. You'll notice that the fleece is stretchier in one direction than it is the other. So when you're pinning your pattern, make sure that the stretch direction is going widthwise, as opposed to lengthwise, so that it'll stretch nicely over your foot. Hence why we didn't add seam allowance along the width earlier. Alright, go ahead and cut that piece out. Then, the next piece that you'll need is the heel portion, which is the pattern folded in half and then traced. And finally, the toe and upper foot portion, which is the same as the bottom portion, except instead of having 2 rounded edges, you'll have 1 straight edge, which is at the maximum length, and then 1 curved edge. My last piece is kind of missing a corner, but it should be fine, right? I'm using scrap fabric after all. Alright, now that you have all your pieces, it's time to sew everything together, starting with the heel and the bottom piece. Lining up the 2 curved edges, right sides facing of course, pin and sew them together, but only up until the quarter line that we marked on our original pattern, so that there's a rectangular portion at the top of the heel piece that can sort of flap around freely. Once this is all sewn together, we're going to flip this rectangular portion backwards onto the heel and then place the toe piece on top, lining up the 2 curved edges and then the straight edges, and pinning all around the piece because we're going to sew everything together. When you do this, just be careful to only sew the 2 layers together instead of all 4 pieces. You'll see that I avoid sewing all the layers down by folding the heel back, sewing as close to the fold point as possible, back stitching, then lifting the presser foot up, flipping the heel forward, placing the presser foot back down, and then continuing to sew all the way around the toe. Alright, and that's basically one sock done. If you turn it right side out, you can see that the sock has fully taken shape. You could totally stop here and just hem the top of the ankle edge, but I really wanted to add more length to my sock. So with the remainder of my fabric, I decided to cut out a 9cm cuff. When you're doing this, just make sure that the stretch is once again running widthwise and not lengthwise. And then also just make sure that the cuff can fit all the way around your ankle. Okay, once you have this pattern piece, you just want to fold it in half and then sew the two ends together to create a tube. And then just hem the top. When I was hemming it, I used a straight stitch, but honestly in hindsight, seeing how much the cuff needed to stretch to fit over my foot, I would have probably used some sort of stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch. Okay, then the last thing to do is connect the cuff to the main part of the sock. And we're all done. Go ahead and make one more sock and you've got the cutest pair. Alright, let's see how they look on.
It stopped the recording. Maybe it turned out good.